July 25th, 1888. Cincinnati, Ohio. Two men sat facing identical machines in a hotel ballroom, surrounded by hundreds of spectators. For 8 hours they raced, keys clattering, each determined to prove his method superior. The winner hit nearly 95 words per minute on a device that 14 years earlier had not existed. That device was the typewriter. And this contest was just the opening shot in a revolution that would rewrite how humanity put thoughts onto paper and who got to do the writing. That was in 1888. But the story of the typewriter begins more than a century earlier, with a 300-year obsession to build a machine that could write faster than any human hand. The dream of mechanical writing did not begin in a factory. It began with a love story. In the early 1800s, in a small town in northern Italy, a man named Pellegrino Turri watched his friend, Countess Carolina Fantoni da Fivizzano, slowly lose her sight. She was going blind, and in an era when the only way to write was by hand, blindness meant dependence. Every letter, every note, every private thought had to be dictated to someone else. Carolina's words were no longer her own. Turri could not accept that. So he built her a machine. It was remarkably sophisticated for its time. Turri designed a mechanism where raised metal letters, mounted on levers, could be pressed down onto paper coated with carbon ink. Each press left a clean, legible impression. The Countess could write by feel alone, finding the keys, pressing them, producing text that anyone could read. No scribe, no intermediary, just Carolina and her thoughts. Some of her typed letters still survive today, more than 2 centuries later. The characters are uneven, the spacing imperfect, but the words are clear. They represent something remarkable. The first known mechanical writing produced by a person who could not see. Turri did not call it a typewriter. That word did not exist yet. He did not patent it. He did not sell it. He built one machine for one person to solve one problem. He had no idea he had just demonstrated a concept that would reshape global communication. But he was not alone in this obsession. The idea of mechanized writing had been haunting inventors for centuries. In 1714, the English engineer Henry Mill received a patent, British patent number 385, for what he described as an artificial machine, or method for the impressing or transcribing of letters singly or progressively, one after another. The patent language was dry, but the ambition was enormous. Mill claimed his device could produce writing so clean and uniform it would be indistinguishable from print. No surviving evidence suggests he ever built one. The patent was a promise and nothing more. Then came William Austin Burt in 1829, an American surveyor who patented what he called the typographer. It was a clunky, lumbering device with a pivoting arm that selected letters from a dial. Burt's own description was brutally honest. He said the machine was so slow that it was never used, but it earned a distinction. It was the first writing machine to receive a United States patent. The pattern was always the same. Brilliant concept. Weak execution. Every inventor could imagine a machine that wrote. None could build one that worked well enough to matter. They did not have the metallurgy. They did not have the precision machining. They did not have the mechanical tolerances required to make a key press produce a clean, consistent letter every single time. The idea was like trying to build a smartphone with technology from the 1700s. The vision existed. The tools did not. That gap between imagination and capability would persist until one man finally closed it, and in doing so, created a machine that nobody wanted to buy. The man who finally solved the problem was not an engineer. He was a newspaper editor. Christopher Latham Scholes worked at the Milwaukee Sentinel. He was a printer by trade, a man who spent his life around letters, metal letters, inked letters, the physical machinery of putting words on paper. And like every inventor before him, he was obsessed with the idea that writing could be faster. In 1867, Scholes built his first prototype with help from 2 collaborators, Carlos Glidden, a lawyer, and Samuel Sowell, a printer. Their first machine was a disaster. The type bars, the metal arms that struck the paper, kept jamming. Every time a typist hit two adjacent keys in quick succession, the arms collided, stuck together, and ruined the page. Most inventors would have tried to make the mechanism faster, stronger, better. Sholes did something counterintuitive. He rearranged the letters. The standard explanation, the one taught for decades, is that Sholes studied which letter combinations caused the most jams, common pairs like T and H, H and E, E and R, and then physically separated those letters on the keyboard. The result forced the typist's fingers to reach for keys that were farther apart, slowing them down just enough to prevent the metal arms from colliding. Some historians have recently challenged this version, arguing the layout was actually optimized to help telegraph operators transcribe Morse code more efficiently. The debate continues. But regardless of the true reason, the outcome was the same. The layout Sholes created was called QWERTY, named after the first 6 letters on the top row. And here is the part that should make you pause. Every smartphone, every laptop, every keyboard you have ever touched still uses that layout. A design solution from 1873 is baked into the device in your pocket right now. Sholes needed a manufacturer. He found one in Ilion, New York, a company called E. Remington and Sons. Remington was a firearms manufacturer. The Civil War had ended, demand for guns had plummeted, and the company was desperate for new products. They looked at Sholes' typing machine and saw something they could mass-produce with their existing precision tooling. The same machines that made rifles could make typewriters. In 1874, the Sholes and Glidden typewriter went on sale for $125, about $3,000 in today's money. It typed only in uppercase letters. It was ornately decorated with floral designs because Remington assumed it would sit in parlors as a novelty item, something pretty for the drawing room. It was a commercial disaster. In its first 4 years, it sold fewer than 5,000 units. The machine worked. The market did not care. But that was about to change, and not because of anything Sholes or Remington did. The typewriter's rescue came from an unlikely direction. In the late 1870s, a salesman named George Washington Yost became one of the first agents for the Remington typewriter. Yost was relentless. He demonstrated the machine in offices, in courtrooms, in government buildings, anywhere people wrote by hand. He was met with indifference, mockery, and outright hostility. Clerks saw the machine as a threat to their livelihood. Executives saw it as an expensive toy. But Yost noticed something. When people saw a typed document for the first time, they reacted with something close to awe. The letters were perfectly uniform. The spacing was precise. The page looked printed, not handwritten. In a world where business correspondence was judged by the quality of a man's penmanship, the typewriter offered something radical: consistency. That was the typewriter's true selling point. Not speed, not novelty, consistency. Every letter looked exactly like the last one. Every document was legible, no matter who sat at the machine. It was the FedEx logo of its era, a guarantee that what you sent would look professional before the recipient even read a word. The break came in 1881, when the Young Women's Christian Association, the YWCA, began offering typing classes in New York. 8 young women enrolled. They learned to type on Remington machines, and within months, every single one of them had been hired by businesses in Manhattan at salaries that rivaled what male clerks earned. This decision seemed small at the time. It was not. Those 8 women represented the beginning of a tidal shift. The typewriter was about to do something no machine had done before. It was about to create an entirely new profession, and it was about to hand that profession to a demographic that had been systematically excluded from office work. By 1885, Remington had sold over 50,000 machines. The Remington No. 2, introduced in 1878, offered both uppercase and lowercase letters for the first time, making typed documents look fully professional. Competitors emerged: the Hammond, the Calligraph, the Oliver, each with slightly different mechanisms, all competing for the same exploding market. And in 1883, a writer named Samuel Clemens, better known as Mark Twain, claimed to be the first author in history to submit a typewritten manuscript to a publisher. The book was Life on the Mississippi. Twain was so taken with his Remington that he wrote to a friend saying he was trying to get the hang of this new-fangled writing machine, but did not believe he could ever learn it. He learned it. And the publishing industry noticed. The typewriter had crossed the line. It was no longer a novelty. It was infrastructure. But not everyone welcomed it. And what came next would reveal something deep about how humans respond when a machine threatens to change the way they work. Bloco 5. Rejeição e superstição. Resistance came from every direction. Professional clerks, men who had spent years perfecting their handwriting, saw the typewriter as an existential threat. In offices across America and Europe, clerks openly refused to use the machines. Some destroyed them. There are documented cases of typing equipment being sabotaged, deliberately broken, or simply shoved into closets and forgotten. Penmanship instructors mounted organized campaigns against the typewriter, arguing that mechanical writing would erode the character of young people. Handwriting, they claimed, was a window into the soul, a reflection of discipline, education, and moral fiber. A machine that produced uniform letters was, by definition, producing uniform souls. That argument sounds absurd today. In the 1880s, it carried genuine weight. Schools continued teaching penmanship as a core subject well into the 20th century, partly because typing was still viewed with suspicion. It was the artificial intelligence panic of its day. People genuinely feared that a machine would strip the humanity out of a fundamental human act. Business leaders raised a different concern. A handwritten letter bore the physical imprint of its author. The pressure of the pen, the slant of the letters, the ink's intensity. You could hold a letter up to the light and see personality. A typed letter was anonymous, cold. How could you trust a document that could have been written by anyone? Some companies flatly refused to accept typed correspondence. In 1889, a New York law firm sent back a typed legal brief with a handwritten note reading, "We do not accept documents produced by mechanical means. Kindly rewrite by hand." There were also fears about forgery. Handwriting could be analyzed by experts. Typewritten text was harder to trace, or so people thought. In reality, early typewriters had distinctive mechanical signatures, tiny imperfections in alignment that could identify a specific machine. But that science did not exist yet, and in its absence, fear filled the gap. And then there was the social anxiety. The typewriter was blurring a line that had existed for centuries, the line between those who dictated and those who wrote. Executives had always dictated letters to secretaries, who wrote them by hand. The typewriter did not change that dynamic, but it made the secretary's work visible. Typed letters looked official. They looked like they came from the boss, and that made some people deeply uncomfortable. The typewriter was not just changing how people wrote, it was changing who had access to the appearance of authority. This resistance would not last, but before it faded, the typewriter would trigger a transformation that nobody predicted. Bloco 6, a virada. And here is where the history of the typewriter takes a turn that nobody saw coming. In 1870, the United States Census recorded the occupations of every working American. The number of women employed as clerks, stenographers, and typists in offices was so small that it barely registered. Women worked in factories. Women worked in textiles. Women worked as domestics. But the corporate office was a male fortress. The typewriter broke that fortress open. It started with those 8 women at the YWCA in 1881. Within 5 years, the pattern was unmistakable. Typewriter manufacturers actively recruited women, not out of progressive ideals, but out of cold commercial calculation. Women were paid less than men. They were seen as having more nimble fingers. And the social conventions of the era made it acceptable for a woman to type, even when other office tasks were considered inappropriate. Remington, Underwood, and other manufacturers placed advertisements showing elegant young women at typewriters, positioning the machine as respectable work for respectable women. The message was carefully calibrated. Typing was feminine, refined, and safe. The economics were powerful. In the 1880s, a competent typist could earn $15 to $25 per week, roughly $400 to $700 in today's money. Factory work paid $8 to $12. For a woman with few professional options, the typewriter offered something extraordinary: financial independence. The numbers tell the story. By 1890, there were over 30,000 female typists and stenographers in the United States. By 1900, that number had exploded to nearly 100,000. By 1920, women were the majority of all clerical workers in America, a position they have never relinquished. But this is also where the story gets complicated. The typewriter opened a door for women, but it also created a ceiling. Typing became women's work, a designation that carried respectability, but also limitation. The typist was essential, but invisible. She produced the documents that ran the company, but her name never appeared on them. She was the machine's operator, not its author. The cultural impact was immediate. The typewriter girl became a stock character in literature and theater, sometimes romanticized, sometimes mocked, always present. In Henry James's 1898 novel In the Cage, a female telegraphist observes the lives of the wealthy through their messages. The typewriter had become so embedded in culture that it was now a literary device. And the machine itself kept evolving. Around 1900, the Underwood No. 5 introduced a design so effective, with visible typing where the typist could see what they were writing as they wrote it, that it became the template for every manual typewriter for the next 50 years. The Underwood No. 5 alone sold over 2 million units. The typewriter had stopped being a curiosity. It had stopped being a threat. It had become the central nervous system of modern commerce, and it was operated almost entirely by women whose names history rarely recorded. If you are finding this story interesting, subscribe to the channel. Here at Common Lore, we tell stories like this every week, and you will not want to miss what comes next. The typewriter did not just change offices, it changed the world. Consider the First World War. Every order, every communique, every casualty report that moved through the military chain of command was typed. The sheer volume of paperwork generated by modern warfare would have been impossible without the typewriter. A single battlefield directive could be typed, carbon copied, and distributed to dozens of units in minutes. Try doing that with a fountain pen. The typewriter also standardized language itself. Abbreviations born on the typewriter entered everyday speech. CC, carbon copy, became a universal term for duplication. The word stet, used by editors to mean let it stand, found new life in typed manuscripts. The return key gave its name to an action that had no physical equivalent before the typewriter existed. Every time you hit enter on a keyboard, you are echoing the sound of a carriage returning to its starting position on a manual typewriter. But the typewriter's most profound global impact may have been in places where it was forbidden. In the Soviet Union, the typewriter was a weapon, not a metaphor, an actual instrument of resistance. The Soviet government understood that controlling information meant controlling who could produce it. Typewriters had to be registered with the authorities. Each machine left a mechanical fingerprint, tiny imperfections in typeface alignment that allowed KGB technicians to trace any typed document back to the specific machine that produced it. Despite that, an entire underground literature flourished. It was called samizdat, Russian for self-published. Dissidents typed banned books, essays, and political analyses on smuggled typewriters, producing multiple carbon copies and passing them hand to hand. A single typed manuscript might be retyped by 10 different people, each producing 10 copies, creating a chain that spread forbidden ideas across the Eastern Bloc. It was the underground network of its time, a samizdat chain functioning like a pre-internet social network, where each node was a person willing to risk prison for a piece of paper. Václav Havel, the Czech playwright who would later become president, wrote his most subversive essays on a typewriter in his apartment. Alexander Solzhenitsyn typed the Gulag Archipelago in secret, knowing that if the manuscript was found, he would be sent back to the camps. The typewriter was the only mass communication device that could not be monitored in real time. A radio signal could be jammed. A phone could be tapped. A letter could be intercepted. But a typewriter, locked in a room, operated by a single person, was untraceable until the paper left that room. And that was exactly why authoritarian regimes feared it. In East Germany, the Stasi maintained files on typewriter ownership that were as detailed as their files on individuals. In Romania, owning an unregistered typewriter was a criminal offense. In Cuba, typewriters were classified as instruments of ideological subversion. A machine built to make business correspondence faster had become a tool of political revolution. And that was a transformation its inventor never imagined. By the mid-20th century, the typewriter was everywhere. Every office had one. Every hotel lobby had one for guest use. Every school taught typing as a fundamental skill, right alongside reading and arithmetic. In 1961, IBM released the Selectric, and it was the most significant redesign in the typewriter's history. The Selectric replaced the traditional type bars with a single spherical element called a type ball that rotated and tilted to select characters. No type bars meant no jams. No jams meant the QWERTY layout's original justification was finally completely obsolete. But QWERTY stayed. It stays to this day. Because by 1961, millions of typists had trained their muscle memory on that layout, and retraining them would have cost more than any efficiency gain. The Selectric went on to sell over 13 million units, and every single one used QWERTY. At the industry's peak in the 1970s, manufacturers worldwide produced more than 10 million typewriters per year. Underwood, Royal, Remington, Olivetti, Smith Corona. These were household names, as familiar as car brands. And then, in the 1980s, the personal computer arrived. And here is the part that catches people off guard. The computer did not kill the typewriter. Not immediately. The first word processors were, essentially, glorified typewriters with memory. The IBM DisplayWriter, introduced in 1980, looked and functioned like a typewriter that could also store text. The transition was gradual, not sudden. It took nearly 2 decades for the typewriter to be fully displaced from the modern office. But the typewriter never truly disappeared. And that is the part that surprises people. The Indian government used typewriters in its courts and administrative offices well into the 2010s. Typewriters are still used in parts of Africa and South Asia, where electricity is unreliable and a mechanical typewriter requires none. The United States military still maintains typewriters for certain classified operations. Machines that are physically air, gapped from any network, incapable of being hacked, used to produce documents that must never exist in digital form. And in an unexpected cultural reversal, typewriters have become objects of fascination for a new generation. Writers like Tom Hanks and the late Cormac McCarthy have spoken publicly about composing on typewriters. Not for nostalgia, for focus. A typewriter cannot receive a notification. It cannot open a browser tab. It does one thing, and it does it completely. The machine that was supposed to be obsolete is still here. Still clicking. Still doing exactly what it was designed to do 150 years ago. In that hotel ballroom in Cincinnati, in 1888, Frank McGurran typed nearly 95 words per minute and proved that a machine could outpace any hand. He won a prize of $500, about $15,000 today, and a gold medal. He probably thought he was witnessing the peak of the typewriter's story. He was witnessing the beginning. The typewriter was ignored. It was mocked. It was thrown into the street by clerks who feared it. It was registered and tracked by governments that feared it more. It opened a door for women that corporate America had kept sealed for a century. It standardized the way the world communicated. It gave dissidents a voice that dictatorships could not silence. And then, when the world moved on to computers and smartphones, it refused to disappear completely. You probably do not own a typewriter, but the keyboard you are using right now, whether it is on a laptop, a tablet, or the phone in your hand, is a direct descendant of Scholz's 1873 design. The QWERTY layout under your fingers was created to prevent metal arms from jamming in a machine that has not been manufactured in decades. The return key is named after a carriage return, the physical action of sliding a piece of paper back to its starting position. Every time you type, you are operating a ghost. The mechanics are gone, but the logic remains. A 150-year-old solution embedded in the most advanced technology you own. That is the power of a good idea. It outlives the machine that gave birth to it. It outlives the people who built it. It outlives the era that needed it. Christopher Latham Scholes died in 1890. He never lived to see the typewriter reshape the modern office. He never saw it empower millions of women. He never saw it smuggle banned literature past the Iron Curtain. He never saw it become the foundation of every digital interface on Earth. But he built the key. And someone, somewhere, is pressing it right now. If this story surprised you, subscribe to Common Lore and tell us in the comments which part of the typewriter's history surprised you most. And leave your like so more people can find this video.